You know what the problem is, right? It's the fact that everybody thinks they've got it all figured out. But if we're being honest, in the short period of time I've been on this rock, there's one thing I've realized. We don't know shit. Back at this again. I'm Dustin Reyes. Joining me today is a longtime friend and one baddest man alive, Aaron Williams. He actually just got done with a match.
He did.
So he's sitting here all sweaty
and
blown up.
Yep.
But Aaron, just to give people a brief overview of who you are, you've been wrestling for how long?
About 17 years, I think.
About 17 years. About the same as me and you.
Yeah,
about the same time. And just traveling all over this crazy world.
Yeah, man.
Doing this wrestling thing.
Yep, putting in the miles. Doing the jobs, taking the bumps.
That's right. Killing your body
stuff.
for a little pay. It's, I always tell people, too, a great comparison. There's a goddamn sewing thread in my shoe.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's you.
So, but anyways, I tell people a great comparison would be indie rock. You got blood on you?
Yeah, I'm bleeding.
Well, nice.
Awesome.
Oh, sweet. Who said wrestling was fake?
Yeah.
But yeah, indie wrestling's a lot like indie rock, where you're traveling all over the country, and you're working for little pay in front of small crowds, sometimes big crowds, just trying to get a look.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much indie wrestling,
Absolutely. I got a cousin who was in an indie rock band for a while. And I guess about a year and a half ago, he just decided he was going to start hitting the road with me. And he always compared it. He was always like, dude, this is the same thing.
Yeah, it's almost the exact same, slightly different venues,
Yep.
And sometimes the same venues. You're working in bars or, just music venues in general. So, but today we're going to talk about something that's close to you, something that means a lot to you, because for a long time you're a pretty religious man.
Yeah, I definitely was raised to be very religious and so on and so forth. But then I eventually found my own path and went on my own way. I've always kind of walked to the beat of my own drummer in that extent. I don't really buy into, I don't really dig organized religion so much, but I am definitely a believer.
It was a guy I used to work with. He goes, I'm not a religious person, but I have faith. And he goes, religion's more of a group activity. He's like, to me, my faith is personal.
Yeah, that's
so,
very well put.
It doesn't matter what you believe, it's all in your, it doesn't matter what everybody else believes or what, it's all about what you believe. It's a very personal thing. And whether you believe in, Jesus Christ or Allah or Krishna, or it doesn't matter, that faith is going to be personal to you. But I think the thing that we're going to really touch on the most is some of the crazier things in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go off of, that's for sure.
So for you, like before we started recording, I was talking about the Giants again, which Jake Christ and I touched on before in the first podcast. But that's something that interests me. And you were saying you don't know about the biblical giants in the States.
Yeah, like I'm aware of the biblical giants. I mean, the story kind of goes that when Satan left heaven and everything like that, some of the angels that were cast out of heaven basically ended up here. And
the Nephilim.
Yeah,
So.
and then obviously they mated with the humans to some extent, and I mean that's the overall figuring. And And, then, baby giants.
Yeah, well, they talk about it on Ancient Aliens
Which, good
a lot.
gosh,
And,
can you believe what happened to those poor women? Good Lord.
the legends are is that they typically die.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so.
But yeah, the Nephilim came down, or something of that nature. The fallen came down, and they saw that the women were fair, and they
And tiny.
Yeah, and tiny. Well, but they gave birth, and they were the men of renown, is what was one I think the passage says. I don't know. I can't quote Bible verses, but I
think that might be accurate. Actually, I mean, I'm no scholar, right, but I think you're on the right track there.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, the flood was meant to cleanse the earth of such things.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, let's say a few of them survived and they made it to, the States. A lot of people, so the legends have it as a lot of these mounds that they find, especially in Ohio. So that's where we're based now. We're based in Ohio. And a lot of the Native American, what they believe to be the Native American mounds, were actually the burial grounds for these giants. Because when we first started settling the area and they were plowing through these, mounds, and they were finding giant skeletons.
Really?
Yes.
Huh. I mean, well, I guess there's reasons why I don't know about this, but
yeah,
that's wild.
Well, that's something they probably just don't talk about in Bible study.
Yeah, they don't.
It's the hidden history.
Yeah, it's probably one of those things you kind of gotta search around for yourself, like many things.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and everyone should.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing, is don't always buy the bill of goods that you're sold as a kid,
man.
Or in school, especially college. They're trying to fit a certain narrative into your head to live by, when really you should discover that narrative for yourself.
Absolutely. Even, I mean, since we're kind of talking about on religion as well, like there are so many things and all just like taking the Judeo-Christian aspect of religion, there are, like probably, I don't know, like 9 just religions out of the Bible itself. And many of them will like acknowledge some of it and not acknowledge the rest of it, and so on and so forth, which is kind of counterproductive if you ask me. But
they definitely cherry pick the shit out of it. There's no doubt about that.
Which that was kind of something I was never really all about, which is kind of one of the reasons why I developed my own personal faith and my own personal walk and everything like that. So. But man, that is something else. Like, there's a lot of things that happen in the Old Testament that kind of make you raise your eyebrow. That's for sure.
Like for you, what's something that you read and you go, whoa, what?
Usually for me, whenever people read in the Bible about a woman keeping her peace, that's incredibly out of context, which kind of bothers me. And then also, pretty much anytime you pick something to live by out of the Old Testament that's not like just 10 Commandments, which are pretty basic. Hey, just don't be a terrible human being.
Don't be a terrible person, yeah.
But all those other things, like one is thrown out all the time about homosexuality and everything like that, which comes out of the book of Leviticus.
Yeah.
But if you read through it and everything like that, if you get through the Old Testament saying, and you get to Christ's birth and everything like that, Christ himself says that, hey, I'm here to fulfill the Old Testament, and here are these new laws that you live by. So in a sense, like, they lived that way then as an aspect of how to survive. But then when Christ came into things and he was born, he didn't necessarily say, hey, forget about everything in the Old Testament, but he was more or less saying, I fulfilled the Old Testament. You don't really need those laws anymore because now you have this new law.
Leviticus is kind of wild, man.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Because people, they like to, like you said, for the whole homosexuality thing, they like to definitely cherry pick that bastard.
Yeah.
But when you read through Leviticus, you're like, what? Oh, well, everybody's going to hell.
Oh, yeah,
now.
man. Like, just if you take Sodom and Gomorrah alone, which most religious people will tell you, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of homosexuality. No, it wasn't.
No.
It was destroyed because of the mindset of the world that they were.
Yeah.
But because of the lifestyle that it was, not that it was just
hedonistic.
Yeah, it was just hedonistic. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, the aspect of letting lust drive their lives had something to do with it more than homosexuality or, greed or anything like that. It's like all of those things were all that that city was about. That was
Yeah.
it. And that's why it was destroyed. It
Can
wasn't
you-
destroyed for one specific reason.
Can you imagine seeing fire rain down from the sky? Like, let's say that, and I think we always talk about the interpretations of the Bible because it was so many thousands of years ago. And it makes you wonder because you and I were talking about ancient aliens a little bit. And I always love that because it's like, what if they were? Because you look back in ancient, not only ancient history outside the Bible, but even some older paintings where they're like painting UFOs and shit like that into the.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, is that like when was this painted? It's like, oh, like 1500s? What?
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
oh, what's going on? So that's why something like. What was it? Ezekiel's wheel.
Yeah,
To
the wheel within a wheel.
yeah. To me, that sounds and they talk about the beings, the angels inside. It's like, wow. I mean, if this was to happen today, people would definitely say it was a UFO.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like, well, maybe that was.
Yeah, and
that's just the way it was interpreted
if
then.
you go by that story, I do believe it was Elijah who was taken up. That's really all the Bible says about it.
Yeah.
He was taken up in a chariot of fire. So if you were I don't know, most of the time in the Bible, people describe things as things they just recognize, not
Yeah.
necessarily like, oh, this is a spherical thing that has jets on the bottom.
How
of
do
it.
you,
It's like,
how do
no,
you
it's-
describe a machine?
Yeah,
when
like
you
to
have
them,
no reference to a machine.
Exactly. To them, a chariot is something that moves you and
Yeah.
moves you at a great rate of speed. And
Who was it?
like, who's to say that wasn't like some kind of, well, I guess it was an unidentified flying object or whatever.
The thing I find interesting is Jacob's Ladder too. That one's another one I find interesting.
I forgot about that one. Actually.
So because you're like, what?
yeah. And I mean, do you know of Enoch?
I was just getting ready to bring it up because
Yeah.
Enoch was Moses' dad, correct?
I believe so. I'd have to go and look to be sure,
So,
but I think so.
What's the
The scripture
what's the
exactly
scripture?
says Enoch walked with God, and then he was gone. I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah.
But Enoch walked with God, and then he was gone.
Now Enoch becomes Metatron, correct?
That I'm not completely sure.
If
of.
I believe that's what I was reading, like he later becomes Metatron, which is an
Not gonna
angel.
lie, that definitely sounds like
Yeah.
a transformer.
So
Which I guess makes sense though, because if he was man,
Yeah, he wasn't-
Then,
he did
then he
transform.
transformed into an angel. Yeah. So good on you, Enoch.
yeah,
Awesome. Good for you.
But
bud.
yeah, and you have the Book of Enoch too, which
It's not. I don't think that's technically. It's not in the King James version.
no,
It's-
well, because it was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's where it
Yeah,
comes from,
yeah.
which I think is incredibly interesting. The books that didn't make it into the Bible.
Oh yeah, they're very interesting. There's I can't remember which one it was. It might have been. It was one of the New Testament books written by one of the disciples, I believe. That in a weird way, I guess they didn't include it mainly because it would have simplified everything.
Yeah.
Like it would have made it like
Was it where they made him less divine? He was more of a man and less divine.
something like that. Just like the way we live, like I said, like there are so many religions that like cherry pick on things. Like this book would have made it less likely that you could do that. You couldn't just be like, oh, okay, well this is the thing you got to do, and then this religion over here says no, not that. You got to do this or this, that, and whatever. This book apparently made it very streamlined. Just
Right.
like, hey, this is the way, the truth, and the life, and all that jazz.
And I think a lot of the complication of that, because I kind of get into philosophy on this, but
I love me some philosophy.
the more complicated things are, the easier it is to control people.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right.
And as we know, religion has been used for many years. I mean, just take a look at the Catholic Church, not to offend anybody out there, but for a long time, it was a seat of power in Europe.
Yeah, it was.
Everybody bowed to them.
Mm-hmm.
And you could get into so many things, especially when it comes to the Knights Templar and whatnot. But religion has been used, unfortunately, to control people as opposed to a way to just live your life.
It absolutely has, and there are actual there are scriptures that kind of go against that. Like there's one scripture that I always point at whenever I'm talking to somebody about how they should live their life or whatever. And the scripture is very basic. It says, "Work out your own soul salvation with fear and trembling," which is basically figure it out on your own. You don't necessarily need someone to tell you how to live. You can figure things out on your own if you desire to. Like, it's not that hard to figure out, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't steal something that's not mine. Or maybe I shouldn't, be rude to somebody just for the sake of being rude to somebody. It's
my cup.
It's not that difficult to...
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, to figure out. But it seems like a lot of religious folk seem to make it a lot harder than it is.
Yeah, I feel like this is the problem with humanity. And we're going to get to
gonna get real.
We're going to get to a little bit of psychology here, and I love psychology.
Oh yeah, man.
Especially if you recently, I've been really studying a guy named Carl Jung, and Carl Jung, the primary thing that got me interested in him is his what he calls the shadow. Now, the shadow is the dark side of everybody's human. It's the dark archetype that we suppress. Mm-hmm. And his thing was, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. So for the person who always tries to repress the shadow and not learn to accept it, they typically try to overcompensate in their everyday lives. So take religion, for example. If you're someone who, my brother, he's an asshole, but he always called them Bible thumpers. Like, he would call his, well, I'm not going to, okay, who'd just say he liked to use the word Bible thumpers, like, who are just very idealistic in their beliefs and very forceful. And they thought they were holier than thou. And it's like, typically those people are the ones who are projecting their own dark side onto other people because they're trying to convince themselves that they don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Like the pastor, or the famous super church guy, I forget his name, who, preached against homosexuality, and it comes out that he was doing crack and, having sex with male hookers.
Yeah, I can't remember which one that was.
Yeah, I can't either, but yeah, and that's, to me, that's always really, really interesting when it comes to people. And it is,
like, it really is, as someone who's kind of, been, I guess what you could say, quote unquote, Bible thumper, I guess. I mean, you remember back in the day when I was going to shows and doing shows, and then after my match, I would go into a room and I would study and I would read because I'd have to teach Sunday school the next day. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
You were a youth pastor.
I was a youth pastor, and I love that part of my life. I love the Lord and everything like that. I still do. However, I have learned through whether it be good things or bad things in my life, that you almost, in order to get actual somewhat of peace, you have to be able to accept the dark sides,
yes,
as well as the light side. You have to have some sort of balance, because you can't be all light all the time, and in the same sense, you can't be all dark all the time either. Which I really feel like, and this is just my own personal thought, I feel like the world in itself is off balance because the people in it are off balance.
Yeah,
they either they go one side too far, and they fear looking at themselves, which isn't an easy thing for people to do. It wasn't an easy thing for me to do, and I still am looking and finding out new things about myself every day. But that ideology of the desire to find yourself and the desire to figure things out is very eye-opening.
Well, the desire has to be there.
Absolutely,
too.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about, people today are even more idealistic than in the past, it seems. Even more idealistic than the most religious person in the 90s, when it seemed like it was kind of at its peak.
Mm-hmm. I think the 90s is really when the idea, and this kind of blew my mind because I was growing up in the 90s and everything like that. But one thing that all ministers spoke about then was faith, and which we discussed a little bit earlier, which I really didn't realize it until talking to older people from my church and everything like that. But before that, faith really wasn't a massive deal.
Yeah,
they didn't really realize that faith is what makes everything move forward and go on, and but that just blew my mind out of the water right there.
Yeah, and it gives you and senses you with a bit of hope. Because you got to have hope, you kind of have to have faith in something.
Yeah, you absolutely do.
Whether that's the religious, or just faith in humanity, you have to have, faith in something.
Yeah.
And I had a young friend, my old best friend. He used to say, without faith, you'll fall on your face. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know why that just rings so well to me, but it really does. But it doesn't matter to me, it doesn't matter what you believe in for your faith, so long as it pushes you forward in a positive way, like, because there's a lot of ideologies out there, and a lot of non-religious ideologies now that are like really headed in a negative direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that energy, I'm big on energy these days. Like I'm becoming this, I don't want to say Zen asshole, but like I'm being more aware of like.
I mean, I'll straight up say that's where I want to be. Man.
Yeah,
I want to be in Zen.
And I'm paying attention to energy and the way that like it affects people, and like if even if you have a negative person in the room, it like almost spreads like a cancer,
Oh, absolutely.
So imagine having a group of negative people who are protesting or who feel negatively about like a TV show or something like that. Like that negativity starts to spread, and even people who aren't typically negative react negatively into it in defense, and it's like, oh well, even though you don't like their negativity, you're letting it spread to you by letting it affect you, and it's like it's so weird because we're very much symbiotic when it comes to mutual energy.
You're absolutely right, because like the aspect of if somebody else has a negative attitude, then if you're trying not to, you immediately recognize that they do have a negative attitude, and then that makes you feel negative toward them. Just by natural reaction. It is a wicked wheel. It really is.
Especially when you're in the wrestling business. There's a lot of fucking negative people.
Brother. Like, I've realized, unfortunately, that you can be in a room full of completely cool dudes and completely cool people and everything like that, and then one person that has a negative aspect and something can walk in a room, and then it can change,
just completely shift the mood.
The entire mood of the entire room.
Yeah, I totally.
And then
agree.
Everybody starts walking on eggshells and doesn't want to say the wrong thing, or doesn't want to offend, or not even offend, doesn't want to say something that will get them buried, I guess is a better way to put it.
Yeah, well, especially in this business is very much like the entertainment business, and as we're finding out more these days, like people are afraid to, if let's say the entertainment industry believes one way, it's like, well, if it seems like the bulk of the entertainment industry feels that way, the people who want to exist and have a job in that industry can't come out with their real beliefs.
No, absolutely.
And that's regardless of whatever that belief may be. They're like, well, this is the flow of things. It's like, well, I don't want to work against the grain because then I won't have a job.
Which is it's so sad, because it makes people, they're not able to embrace their reality. They're not able to embrace themselves, like, because instead of standing up for what they think or what they believe, as we were talking earlier, you got to have something to believe in. They would rather swallow their own beliefs in order to stay in the good graces of people or whatever, which is really sad.
What happens is you compromise yourself as a person.
Yeah, which doesn't seem to be a problem anymore, which is very sad to me and stuff, because one of the things that I always was able to appreciate about like my grandpa, I have a massive respect for my grandpa, who passed years ago. Both of my grandpas, actually, and they were both very stood in their ground. I mean, they were both good men. They both worked hard and everything like that. But if you went against them on something they truly believed, you'd know about it. And they're like, I'm not shaking. You don't understand. You can think what you want and everything like that, and that's fine. And we can be cool. Yeah. But I'm not moving on what I believe.
Yeah.
And I feel like that this day and age is not appreciated, or not even done, really. Like, as you can't have your own opinion. You have to have the opinion that everybody has, which
is sheepish.
Yeah, it's very sheepish.
That's another thing, and you should really look into this guy, because you'll, with our previous discussions about the things going on in our own lives, but Carl Jung, you should definitely look into. And we just had a visitor.
You just popped that little head in there.
Carl Jung talks about the herd mentality, and he explains that a lot and how it works and why it happens. And he's a prolific psychologist, and I heard of him previously in the past, but a guy named Jordan Peterson was the guy who really, because Jordan Peterson talked about Carl Jung and the shadow, and I'm like, I need to know about this shadow. And that's something that I've embraced with wrestling, because it finally made sense. Like, I'm like, okay, this is where I put this.
Yeah.
Which is the whole nother topic that we could get
Oh
into.
yeah, we could go for days on that, just on how both of our characters have, and I think a lot of it has to do with our personal lives as well.
Absolutely.
How our characters and everything like that have changed over the years, and things we have embraced and things we have shunned, if you will, and everything like that. But yeah, dude, it's wild the times that we live in, and I mean, and of course, I know you feel the same way as I do. Like I don't want to hate on anybody for anything that they do. I am a person that is definitely like, hey, live your life, do your life, do your thing, and everything like that. But I really want you to do your thing. I don't want you to do the thing that everybody else is doing because everybody else is doing it to be cool
Right.
and to be accepted and everything like that. I'm like, no, it's okay to not be accepted all the time. I mean, I'm not accepted all the time. I'm pretty okay with it.
Yeah,
actually.
and I've told you this before. I'm very much a live and let live kind of guy.
Absolutely.
Just I have these parameters where I'm like, okay, don't hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to expose my kids inadvertently to something I don't want them exposed to.
Yeah, man.
And
Yeah.
the world, when the world is trying to normalize certain things that were demonized for a long time, and I'm not talking about homosexuality, but just over-sexualizing kids in general, like that's just completely wrong.
Yeah, man.
And that's a whole nother topic. But
it really. Yeah,
but I
yeah.
tell you what, let's switch gears just a little bit because God, we're hitting so
Dude,
many.
We like totally took a big
we like-
curveball.
yeah,
and
it
we
was-
started out at first base. We're in like left field now.
Because I want to get back to a little bit of weirdness and a little bit of spiritualism, I guess. But what do you think the soul is?
Man, that is such a loaded question. Like that was.
Hold on. Holy shit! Can we shut this door?
It was loud.
Yeah, that was really loud.
I don't know if you guys.
Well,
could
see,
hear that,
the problem is we're in this venue in a back room filled with
whole banana
stacks
boxes.
of whole banana boxes.
There's no
So,
bananas in here.
because what this is really guerrilla podcasting. That's nice.
Good.
But anyways, go on. Continue with what you were saying. Hopefully, we don't get interrupted again.
I mean, I personally believe, as a Christian man, I believe that we were created and everything like that. I believe the soul is a piece of God in us, is what I think. And I think when, I think what like makes it's the thing that like returns, if that is a thing.
Yeah.
For us to, leave this body and go on, that's the thing that returns. I feel like that was the piece
Yeah.
of himself that he gave us.
I've heard people explain it as like almost like we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We're
Yeah.
spiritual beings having a physical experience.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that.
And to anybody, the way that I always talk about it to people who aren't religious, and because for one, I'm not a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but I believe there's some. I don't know what God is. I couldn't tell you. Is it Jesus Christ? Is it Is it the Judeo-Christian version? I don't know, but I feel like there's something there.
Yeah,
Because I used to be an atheist,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had a lot of experiences in my life that I'm like, there's no way that this is it, that we just live and we die.
Which, man, no offense to anybody who believes that way. That just seems like it would be so hard to live life
Yeah.
with that
Just knowing it means
mentality.
nothing.
Yeah, like,
But this is the way I look at it from a scientific standpoint, because I always tell people, I joke and I say, it's the force. Okay,
That's
I don't
good,
know what
yeah.
it is, but it connects all of us. And whether you want to call it God or not, I like to jokingly just say it's the force. It's the one thing that connects all of us. And from a scientific standpoint, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed or transformed or moved into something
moved, yeah.
else. So as our bodies are millions and trillions of electrical impulses and energy just in this physical shell, something has to happen to that.
yeah, it's got to
After
move
we
somewhere
go.
else. Yeah.
And to me, that's where we transcend the physical body and we move into because we all, as people, everything's vibrating at a certain frequency,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And this is what we refer to as our reality, like the physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
But there's things that exist outside of what we refer to as a physical reality.
Yep.
So what is stopping that energy transcending this physical reality? And can we not turn out the lights? Thank you. Jesus.
Man,
Is somebody fucking with us?
they're against us, man.
But But yeah, that's how I explain it and get people thinking, because very much there is, I can't help but believe there's some sort of soul or a spirit. Like, dude, okay, my nieces are super, super sensitive. Let's just say that.
Mm.
And recently there were some things going on at my brother's house that were like really, really spooky. Like issues with my oldest niece, hearing things whisper to her, and like a darkness, like a negativity. And my youngest niece said that she dreamed that she saw a dark entity over over her sister, and that she was fighting him, but she could see herself in the bed, like she was out of her body.
Like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, and she was fighting this thing, and she said it was a dream. That's how she put it. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, I looked at my sister-in-law. I said, no, she was having an outer-body experience.
Oh, man, like there's been like, it's funny that you say it, like, because there's been like so many instances of stuff like that that I can like say that I kind of experienced and lived through. And that, like, my mom, bless her heart, because she's a very religious woman.
Yeah,
like that. She's constantly worrying about me because she
Mothers do.
Mothers do, and everything. And she's got another son who's a complete idiot. So she often thinks that I'm going to become a complete idiot. And I always have to remind her, like, Mom, I know way too much, and I've experienced way too much to go down that path or think that there's not something more to this existence. And just a couple of those things is. To speak of darkness and everything like that, you watch any, Paranormal Activity, The Exorcist,
They just turn
lights
the lights
just
out
turn
on
off
us.
all the time, and everything like that. You watch any of these things, and obviously they're very popular and everything like that. So I think that the world itself believes there's some type of darkness upon us. Call it demon possession, call it like just a negative outlet, whatever you may be. But I've legitimately experienced things like that.
Yeah.
That are, for lack of a better phrase, otherworldly.
Yeah.
And
Enough to tell you there is something.
Yeah, there's definitely something out there. Like, not to be terrifying or anything like that, but I definitely recall a young lady who was dealing with something negative. We'll just put it that way. I believed it to be a demonic entity of some kind that had either oppressed or possessed her, so much so that she threw a 500-pound man across the room.
Oh, good God.
She's maybe 130 pounds.
I've heard of this happening too.
Like literally through I watched it. I saw it happen. It was terrifying.
Okay. On that note, because I think they're trying to shove us out of here because they keep shutting the lights off and being loud as hell.
Not a cool move. We're just getting.
We may have to continue this, but let's wrap it up, man. Let's tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter, Planet Williams 1. I'm on Instagram, which I'm much better at, but I kind of suck at it currently. Planet Williams. I'm on Facebook.
Right on. Well, guys, hey, Aaron, thank you very much, man, and this has been Surreal Days.
Yeah.